this morning, I did a live stream reaction to the Nintendo financial report, and of course, it debunked a lot of the narratives that we've been told over the past several months. You know, this idea that the Switch 2 is only selling in Japan, this idea that the console isn't, the games aren't selling well, the idea that, like, Nintendo is failing, you know, all of that has been completely debunked. And now we're kind of in this phase where people are like trying to damage control, and they're trying to manufacture like new arguments out of whole cloth. You know, I talked extensively about a lot of this. You know, I talked about the Mario Tennis Fever thing. I've talked about the Metroid Prime 4 thing. But like the big thing that's happened, and the big thing that everyone's fixating on, is the price hike. And this seems very much like a Nate the Hate situation, where someone claimed that this was going to happen for a specific reason, and then it happened, and people have this mindset that it's because of that specific reason. Because everyone seems to think that the price hikes are due to the shareholder demands, when in actuality, it's just because of the rising costs of materials for the console, okay? Like, you know, because of the tariffs, because of things like that. Like, it has nothing to do with the shareholders. And I think this is kind of important, because this misconception is allowing people like Bloomberg to create this narrative that, like, shareholders have a lot more influence over Nintendo than they actually do. And so it's creating this, like, fan fiction alternate reality where, you know, people are spurging out about the shareholders and about what they're going to want from Nintendo, when in actuality they don't actually have the power to make any demands. It's not like, again, people are like complaining about the stock price for Nintendo, but it's because, like, you know, shareholders aren't seeing a huge ROI because, you know, Nintendo isn't prioritizing the shareholders. Again, this is pretty self-evident if you are a shareholder like myself. But, you know, for normies, like, journos are doing this thing where they're desperately trying to, like, maintain the illusion that, like, the Nintendo Switch 2 is struggling, or that, like, it's doing poorly. And this is a very good example of that, in which they had to raise the pricing because of market conditions, not because of shareholders. And journos are desperately trying to, like, create this fan fiction that, like, things are a lot worse than they actually are for the company. And it is kind of ridiculous. Like, this is the end result of this. The big bad Switch 2 price hike. You know, something that, like, people were going on about since last year. You know, we've gone through 2 PS5 price hikes. You know, we've seen, like, PlayStation and Xbox jump significantly more in price. And yet we have already seen journos complain more about the $50 price hike for Switch 2. Again, like, we're already seeing more discussion about this. Like, people really think this is actively going to impact, like, the performance of the console at all, when, you know, it's still more affordable than the Steam Deck, it's still more affordable than the PS5 and the Series X, you know, like, still more affordable than a PC. Like, $50 isn't shit, okay? Like, you know just how much people pay for, like, you know, other pieces of tech. You know, iPads are like twice that, you know, like, gaming PCs are like 3 times that. Like, it's like, what exactly do you think is going to happen after, like, a $50 price hike? Like, the simple fact of the matter is, normies aren't going to notice, they're not going to care. And if they do, they'll just chalk it up to, like, everything getting more expensive. Like, if you genuinely think this is going to negatively impact Nintendo sales, like, at all, you're delusional. Because they already got through that, like, initial, like, launch period. You know, the Switch 2 is out now. It's super successful. All the hopes about the launch window games have fallen apart. And now we're at the point where the industry is pretending that a $50 price hike is somehow going to negatively impact the console, you know, right when it's about to get, like, a bunch of major announcements. Like, you do realize that the instant we get the next general Nintendo Direct, the instant we start seeing the big holiday games, you're going to see just how much demand for the console is going to spike, right? You know, you're going to see how well Yoshi does, how well Star Fox does, how well, like, Splatoon Raiders does. And, like, you really think the hardware sales are going to slow down because of a $50 price hike? It's just not going to happen. It's just not gonna happen. And this is like the funny thing about this is that like all the grifters, people like, Gandalf the Gay and RGT85 and like Review Tech USA, they all think this is some huge W. Is that like, oh, we told you. Meanwhile, like Review Tech USA is spending like $1,500 on like his next like handheld gaming PC. Okay, you look at like what the rest of these people are doing. You see what like they're talking about. Like these guys, their careers revolve around video games, and they really want to tell you that like $500 for like a brand new console is like too expensive. You know what I mean? It's just like it's really not that big of a deal at all. Like if you can't afford a Switch 2, like just don't buy it right away. Like I just don't understand this mindset that people are in, where they seriously think this is going to like impact the console's performance. Now, like the PS5 was impacted because the PS5 had an insane price hike of like something like $150 more than it was a couple of years ago. Like the Series X has had something like more severe. Like that's the thing about this is that the predictions were wrong, because the predictions for the Switch 2 price hike like seemed to think that the console would jump like at least $100. Like that was everyone's prediction, that it would jump like $100 and that'd be too unreasonable and the console would fail and then Nintendo would go third party and they would put all their games on PC. Okay, that's what people thought was going to happen. But that's not what happened. We got a small price hike because of increased manufacturing costs, and it's very possible that the price will go back down eventually once this situation is resolved. That's kind of my mindset on this. Like it's not going to be like with the Series X and the PS5, where like they just keep getting ludicrously more expensive. Like I expect like the PS6 and the Xbox X to be like over $1,000 at this point. Like, again, because they can't do anything else other than just, like, make their brand more and more expensive to create the illusion that, like, you're buying a premium product. Like, for the most part, like, Nintendo is mocking the competition. And, like, the embarrassing thing is, and I think this is something that no one anticipated, the games themselves are becoming cheaper. Nintendo is offsetting the cost of the console by making the games themselves cheaper, which I think is something that like nobody actually saw coming. But like the simple fact of the matter is you'll be paying less in the long run because of the more affordable games. And that's not something that I think like anybody really saw coming or really predicted. And I think that just goes to show you how like the industry doesn't really know Nintendo as well as it thinks it does. Like the fact that they couldn't like come to this very reasonable conclusion that like maybe they'll lower the price on the software to like to make the price tag more affordable. Like it's like the fact of the matter is, like, this is the issue with, like, complaining about price hikes and complaining about market trends. Like, the industry seems to have this idea that Nintendo is completely and utterly incapable of adapting. Like, we saw this in, like, the iPhone era, because at the time, the narrative was that, like, oh, the iPhone is gonna eat Nintendo's lunch. It's way bigger than any Nintendo handheld. Nintendo's doomed. They're never gonna recover from this, and then they put out the Switch. Like, all they had to do, was just put out the Switch, and suddenly the iPhone is, like, kind of a non-factor. Suddenly the PlayStation and Xbox are, like, non-factors. It's like people have no idea that Nintendo, being a business, is going to come up with a business strategy to deal with these kind of issues, that they're going to adapt, and that they're going to succeed, not because of the strength of their brand or because of their IPs, but because, they're a business that wants to make money and sell to their consumers. It's like, it's embarrassing that, like, people think that, like, something like this would ever stop Nintendo being successful. Like, that's just kind of my mindset on this. Like, looking at this, like, as it's happening, is that people think it's going to be some huge epic L for Nintendo and some W for the grifter community. But, like, the simple fact of the matter is nobody gives a fuck. Like, nobody cares at all. This is going to become more and more apparent, I think, as as we see the Switch 2 continue to break records. Okay, as we continue to see it, continue to sell more and more software and just become a bigger and bigger deal. Like, it's just going to be this very strange, like, kind of collapse in the industry. Like, we're going to see a lot of crazy things happen in the next couple of years. I imagine Xbox is going to go out of business. The illusion, like, Xbox raised their Game Pass price a while back, right? They raised the price of Game Pass. People didn't really talk about that. We saw Xbox Game Pass like become so expensive it wasn't worth it. Everybody declared it dead. Everyone like just unsubbed. And then they like lowered it slightly. And then we saw people celebrating that like Game Pass is back, while the actual problem that Game Pass is a completely unviable service was completely unaddressed. Again, Xbox and PlayStation are just completely failing brands. They're not sustainable. They can't compete. They're not doing anything. PC was never competitive. So this idea that like people will magically spend their time like playing other games that don't seem to fucking exist, like it's just not happening. That's just the grim reality of where we're at right now. When we see these people and we see what they're like, what they pull, and we see what they do, and we see how they talk, and we see like the nonsense they pull. Like, the simple fact of the matter is, Nintendo has a monopoly on video games right now when it comes to their established video game properties. And like the only thing that like anybody gets fired up about on other platforms is licensed games and shit that reminds them of other licenses. Okay, a couple of years back, Helldivers 2 was supposedly like the next big thing, and like now it's completely fallen by the wayside and become obsolete. Elden Ring was a big deal at one point. Baldur's Gate 3, It Takes Two. Like, we've seen so many of these games come and go, while like gamers are still talking about like the legendary Super Mario 3D World and Nintendo Land. Like, those are the games that people actually remember and play. At this point, like, more people remember Star Fox Zero than like a lot of these like Game of the Year winners. Like, I've seen a lot more discussion about Star Fox Zero over the past couple of weeks than I've heard of Baldur's Gate 3 ever, in its entire history. Star Fox Zero has simply aged better than Baldur's Gate 3. And it's not something that, like, the industry would admit to because it runs contrary to the narrative. But the simple fact of the matter is, like, Nintendo games retain their value very, very well. And, if people genuinely don't want to pick up a Switch 2 right now, they really don't have to. Like, the Switch 1 is still a very viable console that people already own. Tamagotchi Life was actually the big seller in the financial report. We're going to see games like that continue to do well on the Switch 1 indefinitely. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still doing well. Like, again, people are, like, moaning and screaming about Switch 2's performance, but, like, it's doomed to failure. Like, not only because the Switch 2 is doing so well, but also because of the Switch 1 remaining relevant and the IP branching out into merchandising and film. Like, we're at the point now where it's becoming increasingly difficult to gaslight people into thinking Nintendo is failing or is on the way out or is not doing very well. Like, it's just not something that is going to stand the test of time. It's something that, like, I feel really needs to be, like, spelled out for people, that, like, a lot of these copes, a lot of these stories, a lot of these ideas, a lot of these narratives, they are not going to survive the next couple of weeks. Like, what we're going to see is that we're going to see Yoshi do very well. We're going to see Star Fox do very well. We're going to see Splatoon Raiders doing well. And we're going to see the same thing we saw with Mario Tennis Fever, Metroid Prime 4, and Kirby Air Riders, where we're told that, like, well, 2 million isn't a lot. It is a lot, considering, like, the scope of these games, their budget, and, the price point at which Nintendo released them. All the while, games like Mario Kart World and Tamagotchi Life, like, break records and are, like, the real drivers of relevancy for the Switch 2. Like, again, we're at the point now where, like, the Switch 2's success is undeniable, but we're in this phase where we're seeing, like, a bunch of copes surface over and over and over again. And increasingly, it is becoming very, very clear that The industry will do whatever it takes to deny reality and continue this farce to pretend that Nintendo is struggling to succeed in the console war.